welcome to the All Things Social Impact podcast. This is the Early Career Series. I'm your host, Andrea Kanaris, and today joining us is Amy. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Coney. I am in my early career. I'm in 2 years into my career at this point. I currently work for KPMG ESG social team. Previously was called KPMG Banara. I did my undergrad in urban design and town planning and then continued my master's in development practice, where I did a lot of social impact assessment courses, as well as like community and international development work, and then obviously planning and urban design courses too. So that's where my early career kind of background started. And yeah, I was lucky enough to get a graduate job in what year are we now? 2023 at KPMG,
Right.
and been there for 2 years now.
Great, fantastic. So perhaps for people listening who are sitting there going, what is social impact? I've kind of heard about it. It sounds really interesting, exciting, but I don't know how to get in there. So just to help those kind of people who are sort of thinking for our listeners who might be thinking along these lines, what would your advice to be to them around, say, first, for example, answering the question, what is social impact from your perspective? Because I think there are a lot of different definitions, and what kind of attracted you to it and what you saw as your options in working in this space.
Yeah, cool, definitely. So for me, social impact, I first started learning about it in my undergrad in the urban design town planning degree. From that, it was more of a development perspective, so the social impact from developments, but development, it can be much more than development. It can be like an initiative or, lots of different things, even just like simple things like e-scooters, like the social impacts of things like that. So it doesn't always just have to be a development focus. But for me, as I started to learn more about that space and into my postgrad as well, it was really like, to me, it's like understanding like your five senses. So your sound, your smell, touch, even taste, things like that. Recently in Brisbane, we had like the water go really gross. So social
Yes.
impact right there. That affects everyone. So it's all those like senses. That's what I kind of think about social impact, whether it be from a development or something. When you're looking at social impact, how does it impact community in those ways? And I think you have to like be really open-minded and not narrow and focus. And that's and not just like on the immediate local community. If things can have like a knock-on effect onto wider community. And I just, yeah, for me, that real, like, I guess the real focus that you get from doing something like a social impact assessment, it really just makes you have to be more open-minded. And I really like the fact that you can engage with community and engage with stakeholders, and
Yeah.
really get to like hear about what is impacting them and take on what they feel impacted on, whether it be like, and at all stages too, in construction, what it's going to be like short term, long term. I think are all important aspects of social impact assessments, and that's what I really drew me to the social impact space all in all, because I've always just had an interest in wanting to work to do better for the community. That even through my town planning degree, that was a focus for me. I was always quite interested in like placemaking and from the design aspect, and just to make spaces and places better for people. And I think it's really important to listen to people, which sometimes can not happen in that field. And so that was always a focus for my future careers. I want to like have that focus where I am listening to people and making sure they feel heard, not just to make it tick box. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
um,
I don't think any of us like that tick box
yeah,
approach or the
yeah,
cutter approach either. But what I
yeah.
really loved was your definition of bringing in the five senses. I
Yes, yeah.
think that's I think what I really liked about your definition was really making it about the community's experience of it.
Mm, yes, yeah,
One, and secondly, that you broadened it beyond, like you said, a project or a
yeah,
program, that it
yeah,
could be anything from, the bike
yeah,
paths or trail tracks or any kind of program or policy. I say it's policy and legislation as well, that
yeah,
really macro level right down to the micro level. So I really
yeah,
love that
yeah,
definition. Thanks for that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely.
and you did touch on how you got into it. So for you, it was a graduate program.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It was a graduate program at KPMG.
Yeah. So how was that process for you? Was it easy to find graduate programs in the space for social impact? Were there a lot of choices for you?
It was definitely difficult. So, in my undergrad, I finished at the end of 2019, going into the pandemic. So that in
Yeah.
itself was quite difficult. That yeah, that that was a very hard process. And so when I went into my master's, I was aware. Hopefully, we weren't going to have a pandemic affecting it, but I was aware that even in my undergrad, I found it quite hard to find opportunities, just where to go in the town planning space. And so I really wanted to start early into my master's, which was 2 years all up, trying to like find the places where I would want to work. But it's just so vast and in the social impact space. So it can, be NGO, it can be consulting, which I'm in, which I never even thought of. I didn't actually really know what consulting was. I didn't know these things. Engineering firms, go into government. There's just so many different ways it can go. For me, I actually found the job on LinkedIn, but at the time, I still really was very new to LinkedIn. I was quite lucky to have it as a sponsored job on LinkedIn. It did show though that LinkedIn is like really helpful, and I think it's a tool that we definitely could learn more about in uni. I think, I was using Seek, and if you type in like community development or social impact, a lot of jobs come up for like psychology and nurse and stuff. So it's like, what are the key words to find a job? I don't
Yeah,
know like where are the where places. But now my LinkedIn's so
yeah.
tailored, it's better. But when you're in that early career, it's really hard because it's so vast and you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly. But once you're in the industry, you start connecting with people and you hear where they work, and you get to hear like about their interests, and they share things on LinkedIn, and you start to build that definitely. But yeah, in the early stages, it was very difficult. But I was very
Yeah,
lucky that this job came up. And again, one thing I would say is no one really teaches you to like be looking for jobs so early. That was something I did learn from my undergrad, and so I was a
great.
bit more prepared. But it was only
Excellent.
because I learned the hard way.
So let's unpack that a little bit because this is really important. A couple of things that you in there for people who will be listening to this, wanting to get into social impact,
Mm,
and you touched on a couple of things. One is how to use LinkedIn
yeah.
effectively to help
Yes.
find those opportunities. And that from listening to you was not just about using LinkedIn to find the job, but it was about how you set up your profile
Yeah.
to
Yep.
put you in the spotlight or in
Yeah.
the eyes of the people who are looking to hire.
Yeah.
If
Definitely. Definitely.
And the other one I think is also the timing
Mm.
of how early you have to be. So for you, let's start with the timing first, because I think that's really crucial, especially as we're coming into the start of a new year. This may be
Yeah.
really important for people. Is what time? What was the timing? So
It
you started
was.
yours in 2023.
Yep. So I started
When?
February
Okay,
2023,
great.
and I applied for the job in January 2022.
Wow.
So it was
Yeah.
very early, and I wasn't due to graduate at the end of 2022. I was only halfway through a master's at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, the job was advertised in January, and so that's longer than a year, which is just
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah.
But very lucky I
And
found
I
it.
think that speaks to the competitiveness of, KPMGs. It's one of the big four.
Yeah,
Everybody's heard of them. And congratulations on that, by
thank
the
you,
way.
thank you.
That's It's a testament to you because the reason they go so early, and this might be really of interest because it's not just KPMG,
Mm,
it's a lot of the organizations do this with their graduate programs. They're looking for the creme de la creme. They
mm,
want to have first peak of graduates, so they go in really early
yeah,
so
yeah,
that they can grab the students that they want.
mm,
And if you miss out, it's not because you're not one of those people. It's
mm.
just that you miss that opportunity to put
Yeah,
yourself in front of them. Is what we're actually saying,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, because
So
there was a good few
appreciate
advertising that January, February period as well,
Yeah,
and a lot
yeah,
of consulting engineering firms as well. So, um,
correct. And I
yeah,
think government departments too. If your interest
yeah,
is in the government realm in terms of
mm,
legislation, policy development, program development,
yeah,
service planning, any of those areas that these skill sets in social impact would apply,
yeah.
those graduate programs would also start quite early. So,
Yeah,
I,
definitely. And I think
that's
even like vacation or internship kind of programs would also be
correct.
looking for like summer coming. So you that like maybe like February to April time, you may start seeing them as well for this end of the year. Which is also, yeah, it's one of those things sometimes when you're in uni, you're like, oh yeah, I'd like to get an internship like a month out from summer. And a lot of them have already hired. So if that was something I would go back on, it would just be like to look all times.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because there'll be people listening, I suppose, that fit within a couple of buckets. One, maybe kicking themselves and feeling bad because I should have known. It's like, no, you shouldn't have.
No,
You
you
can't just have
definitely,
known,
yeah.
because, like you said, it's not necessarily taught within your
No,
degree. It's not necessarily well talked about. So thank you for raising that issue of timing, because I think
of
it's really
course.
critical for people
Yeah.
who know that they want to get into social impact. These jobs are
Mm,
quite competitive.
mm,
And if you're listening, position yourself early, like
yes.
really early.
Really
Start
early.
a year and a half or even 2 years to at least start researching
Yeah.
which organisations may be offering graduate programs that you may be interested in,
Mm,
finding out when they drop so that you can be ready to enter that application phase. And it
yeah.
will be significantly earlier than when you're finishing your degree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be
So
my
that
biggest
is
tip.
an absolutely gem. I think if anyone's listening to this particular podcast, they're going to have gotten, if nothing else, out of it, the timing thing, which will be really helpful, because I think a lot of people have found themselves in that position
Absolutely. Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
universities don't really tell you anything about that. They're just so focused on the learning and the now. So, yeah, when you get
Yeah.
like no one's like, by the way, you should be looking at jobs right now.
Yeah, and that's one I could put a flag on myself. It might be worth doing a session just on graduate, because it's
Mm,
not just timing. Then I imagine it's also the criteria and knowing what you need to have ready
yeah.
for
Yeah.
that process, and then unpacking the process itself, because
Yeah.
it is a long process. I'm sure there's a lot in terms of preparation that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
need to position yourself better
Yeah.
for those
Yeah,
jobs.
definitely. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be a
And
good one.
yeah, and I think for those listening, I might just drop in, because you said there's, you know, you expanded that to not just, you know, the top four, the obvious ones. You also
Mm,
added in engineering firms
yeah.
and the like. I'd also like to flag with people that some of those top NGOs would offer them as well. You know, the
Mm,
not for profit, the World Banks,
mm,
the IMFs, all of those international development
yeah.
organizations, and those large things like the Red Cross. They would also have potentially graduate programs that you could be looking at early. So
Yeah,
keep
absolutely.
those in your head when you're doing your research, depending what your interest area is. Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing you mentioned, Amy, that I'd like to unpack a little bit was the LinkedIn. You made comment that the LinkedIn page that you had didn't necessarily have the information about yourself that really maximized and grabbed the attention of the employers. Would you like
Yeah.
to explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, definitely. I think yeah, LinkedIn's just like a totally different when you first use it. You're like, what is this? And you don't have the connections, and you've only got a couple people, so you're just trying to like work out how to use LinkedIn to fit
Yeah.
you and like who to connect with. And I know like when I first signed up, I'm like, oh, I don't want to like connect to people that I don't really know. Like, is that acceptable? You can't like these like LinkedIn rules that you don't know about, because it's just yeah, it's a but it's a great tool when you do get to using it. And yeah, just I guess it's I also found it a bit hard because I wasn't in a career yet, so I was kind of like, well, like my experience is only education, which is not a bad thing now looking back, but I just didn't think that I was at that level where people would look at my profile.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of yeah, tailoring it in a way that is like like if you're looking at your university experience and stuff and turning that into something that can make you look employable. And I guess I would like follow different organizations, just Googling like social impact, and I'm trying to find like maybe more boutique firms. Again, I didn't know of KPMG at the time, but yeah, looking at, I kind of had an idea more of the engineering firms just because of I had looked at them as for graduate programs when I did my town planning degree. So that I already kind of knew. And a lot of them, like your GHD and stuff, are doing the like social impact programs and stuff. So
Yeah.
now they're branching out to that ESG space, a lot of them, which is exciting to see.
Yeah, it
But
is.
yeah, I would probably say just trying to like, yeah, I think Google and LinkedIn together, looking at Google, trying to find them and then following them. And then it kind of like tailors your LinkedIn to as with suggestions on places to follow, groups to join. And then once you start tailoring it, that's when you'll start to see more of the jobs that they have. Yeah.
I, I think you touch on something really important there, and it's that LinkedIn is a network. If you think of it
Yes.
as a network first and foremost, then it's about finding where you belong or where you
Yes.
want to belong
Yeah. Yeah.
and connecting. with organizations, individuals that you resonate with you,
Yeah,
that align with you. And I think this is the power of LinkedIn.
definitely.
So, a lot of ones, like you said, say Seek, and that's not to pick on Seek, but, other job networks that are about, here's a job, do you want to apply?
Mm,
LinkedIn is more about, what are you about? Because there's other people on here who are about the same thing, who share the same values, who share the
yeah,
same ideals, who are interested in the same issues and topics that you are.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
once you find them, it becomes a lot easier then to be in the front of, and understand what that industry and what that kind of, those like-minded people are talking about,
Mm,
the language that they're using. You can start to look at their profiles and see how they present themselves, especially if
yeah.
there's someone that's perhaps, like, emulating somebody is the biggest compliment, right? So if you
Mm,
see somebody who you think, now that's what I really want to do, then you can sort of look into, well, what are things are they talking about? What kinds of things are
mm,
they, articles are they reading? What kinds of jobs are they working on? You can really get an insight that
mm.
you don't get from job sites, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
LinkedIn has this other beautiful layer that, once you, like you say, figure it out, when it clicks in your
Yeah.
brain and you go,
Yeah.
that's what LinkedIn's about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And so
took a while, but it is, yeah,
it
it's
does
great.
take a while. I remember when I first started, that was the thing that, I think it clicked with me when I started joining groups. And I know a lot of people who don't know that there are groups. I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
you can join
Yeah.
groups
Yeah.
of like-minded people, so that you can then start understanding them. And, I guess as you get more confident, you realize that you can actually reach out to people. You can actually
Yes.
make comments on their posts. You can
Yep.
share their posts. So you
Yeah.
can really build your own network of like-minded people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that might be what you were alluding to, if I was hearing you
Yeah.
correctly. It's quite powerful. So you use that quite effectively now.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, definitely. I still definitely it would be a work in progress, I'd say. Like you said, it's kind of like a confidence thing. I
for
think
sure.
maybe give me like a couple more years and I'll be more confident. But I still use it, and it's a great way to like put out like what I've been doing at work, or and not even just from a work perspective, like more KPMG wide, like some of the events that KPMG holds. It's great just to, because I do get involved in a lot of the like extracurricular things. So it's great to like
Yeah,
showcase like it kind of can give people a bit of an insight into you as well, and like your
yeah.
interests that aren't just always work focused.
Yeah, and I mean, my personally, what you pick up on there is, as a social impact practitioner, a lot of them listening may not, especially those who are maybe already in a job, or have been in a job maybe for a lot longer,
Mm.
will know that sometimes, as a social practitioner, you may be in an organization on your own,
Yeah.
full of people whose skill sets are completely different from yours.
Yep. Yep.
They don't necessarily speak the same language. They don't think the
Yes.
same way. They might be engineers. They may be environmental scientists. They may have an interest in what you're doing, but they don't fully understand it.
So,
So
yeah.
that can be quite isolating. And I think this is where LinkedIn can help, because what you're alluding to is being able to showcase with people who think like you, and have conversations with
Yeah.
people who think like you,
Yeah.
connect with them. So you can get that support outside of maybe your immediate workplace,
Yeah.
which is a value
Definitely.
add of
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Have you found that, like, have you met many people through LinkedIn?
I have, yeah, yeah. I've met people definitely through LinkedIn. Probably not as many, but I like KPMG is such a big firm with so many
Yes.
different areas. So I would say my LinkedIn is quite diverse because I've got so many friends that work in different areas to
Yes.
mine. So I guess that's where that diversity comes through, which is great to see. It helps me with understanding what other people do. Like you said, not everyone can understand what we do, but sometimes I
Yes.
need that with other people as well.
Yes.
um, so it kind of goes both ways. But yeah, definitely want to keep using LinkedIn more. And I think it's great to like see like what events are happening, whether it's Queensland or national, just to understand what is going on in that social impact space. Like the one we went to, was it last year now? Gosh, my years are getting confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like I saw that on LinkedIn, and without that, I probably would have missed it. So it's good to for like networking events as well.
Yeah.
To
I
get
think events are really important. Events and training are the other two things
yes,
I
yeah,
think that are worthwhile for people who are starting. Look at the events, look at the training.
yeah,
Um, It's actually quite impressive how much training they have on there.
Yes. Yeah, I do need to do more training. That is definitely, there's some
Yeah.
really, really good courses on LinkedIn that I've seen, and
Yeah.
I'm like, that's, I definitely want to do that. Just
Yeah.
like a skill upgrade, you know?
Yeah, the ongoing professional development stuff
Yep.
that we did to earlier on. So if we're moving past LinkedIn and the tools, because I think they're important, but I think we don't want to labor the point. I think people get a nice flavor of how you
Yep.
can use it, how you can benefit from it. But if we go on to, you find yourself in KPMG, so now you're 2 years into your
Yeah.
career. What have been the challenges that you've faced in the practice of social impact so far?
Oh, it that is a good question. I say one of the challenges just from the consulting kind of, it's going into from uni, which is very academic writing, academic thinking, to a consulting world. It's very
Yeah,
different. Um, and that's not, I've like done 6 years of academic writing, and now I've got to like kind of unlearn that and do the consulting way of writing. So it's like that, from that perspective, that has been a personal challenge for me. And I know it's quite a similar challenge for a lot of other people as well. You're unlearning things that you've learned. And yeah, but I would say in terms of social impact, I don't think I realized how there are so many barriers, I guess, and maybe not as many people understand it as much, especially being in like a business world. They is more tick boxy for a lot of companies. You definitely have companies that are very, very keen. And so I guess it's trying to like make it more than just the tick box, and trying to get that understanding across to other people and other businesses. That can definitely be a challenge. A lot of people don't understand still why social impact's important. I think a lot of people get it with climate change, because we are in ESG, so it's environmental social governance. So people get that with climate change. I think it's just something so big at the moment, then they can see the impacts. But social, because it can be so minor and so small, I think people just feel like they can disregard it a bit more. But I don't think what they realize is there's that link between ESG. That's why it's ESG. Environmental affects social, social affects environmental. So it's, yeah, that's probably one of the challenges, I would say. I hope that kind of explained it.
Yeah, no, it does. So let's unpack some of that a little bit because I think, the transition to university is one thing in particular. So let's start there.
Mm,
That transition, and you mentioned the unlearning, which I think is really interesting
mm,
because I would suggest that part of what happens is that difference between the theoretical frameworks, which are really important. They kind
mm,
of that underpinning knowledge is extremely important. But the practical application
mm.
is it's different.
Yeah,
There's a pragmatism and a practicality, and sometimes the theoretical doesn't actually
yeah.
work in the real world. So it's not about losing what you've I would argue it's not about losing what you've learned. It's
No,
about
definitely.
adapting what you've learned and how to apply that into the workplace. And I do find that I recall that was a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I actually, one of the courses I did at UQ, I can't remember who taught it, but it was a social impact assessment course. And it's like one of the standouts in like my whole uni degree, because we actually like learnt the theory, but then we took we had a development in Brisbane. We went into groups and we worked in groups to go out and engage with stakeholders on a proposed development in Brisbane, and to do like surveys and actually do the community engagement stuff, which teaches you so many skills in itself. And I think if you're doing social impact, you really, like, a big part of wanting to do it is to engage with community and stakeholders. So
Dr.
I pardon.
Was that Dr. Regke in the
It
that's
might have
right.
been, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's been like 3 years now, so
Yeah.
but it was a really good course because it just, yeah, it taught us like how to apply that theory and actually like do the community engage. Like we stopped the course for like 2 weeks while we went out. It wasn't like there was the same workload, like having to go to lectures and stuff. There was like an understanding that no, like this is the focus now. And then we presented the findings, and then we went individually and did like a mini SIA report, I guess, which was definitely one of the most practical things I've done. I think it was a good blend of like theory and practice for sure.
Yeah. And my course was the same. I did one at the University of Queensland as well.
Yeah,
And the program I've done, I think, has wrapped up, but it was the social planning and development course.
yeah,
And they did that. They incorporated the social impact assessment. So you'd actually
yeah,
completed one before you finished, which I think is
yeah.
really useful.
Really helpful.
Not
Yeah.
all courses do that. Like
No.
not all courses do that. I've always thought that it's really great that the UQs actually incorporates it into the course.
Mm.
But for those who don't, when you're talking about applying it to the, like one of the things you talked about was dealing with clients. Now that's something you don't, that is a consulting thing,
Yeah.
as you alluded to. It's really a consulting thing.
Yeah.
Actually trying to being, I think when I listened to what you were saying, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the fact that you had to talk to clients about their social impact beyond a tick box exercise, I suppose it forced you to really address what is social impact, what does it mean, and why is it important. It kind
Yeah.
of makes you have to be really clear about
Mm.
not just what it is and why it's important, but then how to articulate it, which all sounds really like, yes, because you've done an assignment, you're used to doing assignments where you go, this is this and this is this and this is why. But it's quite different, isn't it, when you're having to articulate it to somebody who's sitting in front of you in a way that they understand,
Understand.
that's relevant to them.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That is the big thing. It's different for every organization, every
Yeah,
person, and you often find sometimes throughout a project it might change a bit as they kind of like start to understand maybe some things a bit more, and like how they what they need for their business. But yeah, yeah, that's definitely I find the biggest thing is it changes all based on like what their priority is in with the project that we're doing as well. Definitely.
yeah. So, and how did you navigate that? Let's have you got an example that you can use without naming an organization, but just of
Oh,
how you sort of move the needle with them around understanding why it's important to do social impact?
yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think this, for people listening, this might be something they find themselves in a position for, and
Yes.
maybe haven't done it before. They might be interested to hear, like, how did you do it successfully in your navigate that problem the
Yeah.
first time you did it? Yeah,
Yeah. One that comes to mind was a lot of our work is online, but it was in person, this one. It was a pretty big client. And basically the CEO sat there and was like, I don't get it. Why is this important? We were looking more at a human rights governance sort of thing, instead of social impact as so. But yeah, it was like halfway through the conversation, like, I don't get it. Why is this important? Why? And I've never been in a conversation where someone's just been like, "What is the point of this?" kind of thing. Um,
yeah,
and I didn't sit there. I didn't say anything. But my teammate who was there, she had an amazing, amazing answer and really was able to put it in the importance of the work they're doing, and also kind of related it back to work they have previously done as well. And I think that really helped because I saw that I think maybe it was the next time we met up again. They said about, oh, okay, like I know at my old job we had someone came up to my desk and said, we need a policy on domestic violence or something, and she was kind of like, well, why does that matter for me? And when it was explained why the impact of what happens at home can impact people in the workplace, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that now. And so once we put it into that kind of like, well, your impact from what you're doing in this current role, that will impact this person this way, or this person this way,
yeah,
or that. Once you kind of got to that like local level, I guess, instead of like the grand, like this is the human rights, like this is what we're going to do. Once you kind of made it more like, I don't know, localized on like a particular thing, it was like, oh, yeah, actually, no, I get that now. I get that. I get why
yeah,
that's important. And I think, yeah, just breaking it down, because if you go in sometimes with clients and you're like, you use these big words and we're going to do a human rights diagnostic framework and blah, 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 like
yeah.
it can overwhelm people that I don't, like you said, they don't understand the language. Then you've really just got to break it down into a way that they can understand it. And yeah, and relate as well. I think being
Yeah.
able to not relate personally but like have sympathy, I guess, for what could potentially happen.
Yeah. I think it's making it real for them, isn't it? I mean,
Definitely.
the language is critically important here, and I
Yeah.
think one thing I would caution to people is it's not about, we're not talking about dumbing it down, are we? We're
No,
talking
no.
making it real, making it
Yeah.
understandable. Not everyone lives in academia. Not
Yes. Yeah.
everyone you're going to meet and interact with clients
Yeah.
are going to have a social science background.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the academic terms, which are really useful for us to know and understand,
Yeah.
are not necessarily useful when talking to a client or
Yes.
even the community for that matter. One I think is distributive justice. Like there's no point talking to a community about What do you think is the distributive justice impacts to you? Like, that's not the way to have the
Yeah.
conversation, but use your knowledge and understanding to put it in terms that mean something to them in their
Yes.
day-to-day life.
Yeah,
That's a
absolutely.
great that's a great example.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we actually like ended up being an amazing project and we had great feedback. But one of the things was we did a lot of like purpose work with our chief purpose officer, who's Richard Buller, who is actually he founded Banara and he still is at KPMG. And he actually came in and he held some really great purpose workshops, and that was a really amazing thing to watch because you could see everyone in the room like connecting the dots to like the purpose of what the work is doing and how the impact it will have. And so I think that was really important as well. Like a good way to like think when you talk to clients is to make what purpose will it will it bring the
Yes.
work that you're doing.
That's a fantastic way to frame it, because I often say social impact is exactly that. It's about
Mm.
connecting dots.
Yes, yeah,
What you've got to be careful is that people aren't connecting the wrong dots,
yeah, yeah,
and it's really making sure that there's a logic between that purpose
yeah,
to an impact, right?
yes, yeah,
and, and
definitely,
and then even the purpose as to why you would even need to know or understand your impact. And in the
yeah,
ESG, as you say, that's really critical. So let's
mm,
pick up the other comment you said about ESG, because it is a growing issue. This is increasingly where social impact is being discussed
mm,
at the S in the ESG.
yes, yes,
Which obviously you're having some experience with KPMG, which makes a lot of sense given the work that they do. You alluded to some linkages between the interactions between the environment and the social, and then the social environment, and how they
mm.
interrelate. Would you like to expand on what you meant by that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I've always had interest in both because they are so interlinked. I think, just a good example, I did my thesis years ago, my honors degree, which was in my urban design and town planning degree. And because I am so interested in both, I looked at the impacts of like global warming on livability for especially people that, have a disability, elderly people, and relating it to accessibility. So it was a few different things going on, but, people that often more in a vulnerable position will often walk. They don't maybe have car access, so they'll be walking and using buses. And so like how our pathways are designed and not many trees. So I was looking at green infrastructure and how we look at the impacts of global warming. We want to put more trees in, but then that can like uproot pathways, and then that can have an impact, like a social impact on people who use those pathways. So there was like a bit of a mix of all different things. But it was looking at like an environmental problem, a solution that is going to help environmentally, but then how that impacts the community. And I think that's just like a small example. But yeah, we see a lot of our work is we do a lot of work of the climate change sustainability team in the ESG at KPMG. But yeah, you'll have social impacts come from environmental impacts, as we're seeing. We've just seen massive fires in America. We even some of our storms here have been crazy. Like the flash flooding just around where I live is crazy just in like one day. So yeah,
In the floodplain, yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's only gonna get worse. So that's like, yeah, social impact from environmental, also our social impact on the environment. Especially like you look at the mining aspect, opening a mine. I think when you're looking at impacts on the environment, like water, how that then impacts communities, because it's going to bad water quality is going to impact environment, and it's also going to impact communities. So there are some overlapping things, and I think it's hard to separate the two at times. You can, but I do think it's better to acknowledge that the two intertwine, definitely.
I think water's a really good example.
Yeah, water is a
Amy,
really big one.
well, the hierarchy of needs. It's
Mm.
essential
Yeah,
to life,
yeah,
life for humans and for the environment. It also shows that where a lot of these large developments talking about, and I would say it's not just mining; it's all these developments when you're
mm.
talking about that use water.
Yeah,
There's an interface between farming
mm.
and irrigation, and farming is food. Again, hierarchy of needs. So I think it's intricate, it's interrelated, as you said. Like it's like this,
Yeah,
and I think it's one where it's not about saying. And I think this is a mistake people make with social impact. See if you agree with me that it's a lot of people see it as somehow one more important than the other, and it's kind
mm.
of really not what it's
No,
social impact. It's about a lot of the time, isn't it? It's about risk, right? It's about
yes, yeah,
knowing the risk
Yeah.
and knowing what are your high risk, what are ones you can
Yeah.
either avoid if possible,
Yeah.
preferably,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then understanding the risks from all angles,
Mm.
uh,
Mm.
in
Yeah.
terms of taking the environmental consequences to people and
Yeah.
knowing how whether or not you can manage those risks and whether or not everything's a trade-off. I know some people might feel uncomfortable about that, but that's kind of the
Mm.
reality. Everything we
Yeah.
do is a kind of trade-off. So understanding the risk that you're taking if you're going to pursue a particular project, which is kind of
Yeah.
what we're doing in the
Yeah.
social impact assessment space. But
Yeah.
even talking to a company who's saying, why would we do this? Well, they've got to know the risk they're taking and be clear
Absolutely.
on how they can manage it moving
Manage it.
forward.
For sure,
Yeah,
for sure, definitely. That's like a big part of like my work is
yeah,
it's the managing the risk to business
yeah,
from human rights and social impact. So, yeah, a lot of risk language is used in my job
yeah,
because it is managing those risks and understanding those risks, trying to stop the
yes,
risks before they happen, and
yeah.
yeah, and yeah, trying to monitor them as they go forward so they don't get worse or you know
And how did you find, like, was there the risk component of it in your transition from university into the workplace? How much how much more focus on risk did you have to, like, was there much of an adjustment? Was there much of a shift in terms of what you'd learned in the application of things in terms of having to learn this other, was it learning another skill set or was it honing it?
yeah,
How
definitely
did that
learning
play
another
out for
skill set because I've never yeah the whole risk language it's yeah I've
you?
never learnt
Yeah,
much about that at uni. So it's definitely still learning for sure.
yeah,
Something that I've just learned through doing projects, and it's kind of one of the things that just clicks. Like oh, I get this like risk language kind of talk, because it is a talk that a lot of businesses talk in and understand. And again, that's how we kind of like adapt what we're doing, like our social impact language to be more understandable to business because that's what a lot of businesses are interested in. What's my risks? How do I stop them or manage them? So yeah, it's definitely something that I didn't learn much about at all at uni, but it's become a big part of my work here for sure.
so when you reflect back on that transition, what do you think would have made your transition easier? Is it incorporating social risk, or is it I suppose is it a online training course, or is it some kind of professional development
Yeah,
workshop that would help? Like, I mean, for you, if you reflect back, if you'd have known that you needed more risk skills, would that have changed your
yeah.
experience going into social impact, do you think?
I don't know what uni could do to incorporate that more, but I feel like a training would be good.
Mm,
Like I feel like when we do start in a grad position, though, there are so many trainings at KPMG. It can be quite like whoa, overwhelming. So maybe like 2 months in, when it's like your brain's a bit like, okay, I can focus on this training and really understand it. But yeah, I do feel like a training more looking at that risk and the especially because it is like the private sector do look more at that how risk kind of language, I guess. So I feel like a training would be good or like a workshop even.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe a workshop like uni could have even helped. That would have been great, like to do something with last year's students. It'd be cool to do maybe something like a uni slash industry workshop to really you could open it up to out of risk as well and just look at the consulting
yeah.
world and private world and to
I
understand so
yeah.
people kind of in uni are like a bit more prepared, I guess, because it is super different.
Yeah, having been a consultant myself, I think there's a lot about just being a consultant that you just kind of,
Yeah,
in the current climate, it just seems like you jump in and
yeah,
learn as you go.
yeah, yeah.
It is a different world. It's a
Mm,
different way of thinking and a way of doing things.
yeah.
Um, if you could pick one thing from the consulting, because this is a social impact, but a lot of people listening may find themselves in consulting. A lot of
Mm.
social impact people do consulting. So I think it's worth asking, from the consulting side of things, what is the one thing that I think would have really helped you in that transition into consulting? One bit of
Um,
information, one bit of insight.
Ooh. Um,
I'm sure you've got many.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it would be probably one of the things I've already mentioned is just how like the consulting world operates, I guess, which is going to be different for each place, but just understanding the language and the world of that is consulting.
consulting.
Yeah, I don't know if that's very helpful, but
Well, I think,
um,
yeah, I mean, let me have a go having been somebody who's consulted for a while.
yeah,
I don't think it is that different. I mean, I think there's differences between consultancies, yeah, size
yeah,
of their
yeah,
focus areas, but in some ways, they're all kind of the same
mm,
in some regards, in the
yeah,
sense that people are paying you for your time.
mm,
Um,
definitely.
so it's definitely about efficiency in
Yes, yeah,
delivery, being able to log your times, know how long each activity that you do is
mm,
going to take,
yeah,
and
yeah,
being efficient in the delivery of it.
yeah,
Um, Budgeting becomes really important. So it may or may not have been something that you did at university in terms of knowing how to maintain,
yeah,
being aware of a budget and delivering not
yeah,
just within your time frame, but within a budget, which is a
with it, yeah,
different
which is very
mindset.
different.
Just
Yes,
considering social impacts, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah.
is which is what you get into the business for, and then you find yourself
Mm.
doing all these other
All these other
things.
things. Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good point. It would probably be those other things, which
Yeah,
I feel like I was lucky because I had exposure to that just in my like retail job. So I did learn those skills from there. So,
outstanding.
but yeah, coming in, I yeah, we had budgets and KPIs in retail. So you kind of do have an idea of that sort of what like the behind the scenes how it operates. And yeah, those skills have always been very helpful.
Project.
It,
We're talking about project management skills, aren't we?
yes,
Like,
the project management sort of stuff.
yeah, so we touched on one skill, which is risk assessment, that perhaps
Mm,
you may not have had in the forefront of your mind. The other one is
yeah,
project management
project man.
skills.
Yeah, yeah.
It's being understanding what's required of you, the time it's going to
Mm,
take you, how much money you've got to actually work
yeah,
within, and
yeah.
how that's calculated. Is really good. And I think the other one is the selling skill, which, I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
social impact people are not sitting there going, "I'm a salesperson."
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
different skill set, but there is a kind of sales element, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
In a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Um, and I know for myself, I would never have described myself as a salesperson at all. It's something that doesn't come particularly natural to me
Mm.
to sell. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, they are good points that I haven't forgotten about, but they are very important things that make it so different is that all that engagement management side of things. And yeah, you are working for clients. And yeah, when you're in the social impact at university, you're just like I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna like change the world kind of thing, which you still can, but there are like some little restrictions. And I think, yeah, never lose that that what drives you. Like I've still not lost that. I still know what I want to do and where I want my future to go and how to make that change. But I think you just gotta be patient with the boundaries that you've got.
that's a lovely thing to sort of remind people, and maybe we could shift focus slightly into when you're facing these challenges. How do you keep that, what you just alluded to? How do you keep that strong sense of
Mm,
this is who I am? This is the difference I'm going to make. And
mm,
maybe I've been confronted with some challenges that enthusiastic first beginner has. I'm going to change the world, and
mm,
maybe some realities around the time frames for that, or challenges
mm.
around actually achieving that, become real. How do you keep yourself centered and focused on that bigger goal? What are
Yeah.
there any methods and approaches that you adopt to help you do that?
Um, yeah, I feel like everyone can get caught up in their like day-to-day job and you can lose sight of that definitely. But I think you just got to look at like if it's only a smaller project, what was that win on that project? You just got to keep looking at the wins and what you're learning as well. Sometimes you can look back and be like, "Oh, what have I learned?" But as you're doing a project, I think it's important to look at and reflect on each project like, "Oh, yeah, I've learned that. That was really cool." Yeah, we all definitely do have a bit of self-doubt at times. But I think it is very important to just keep those moments of reflection. I'm definitely having that as I am nearly 2 years in. I'm like, wow, like that went so quick. But I'm also looking at what I have learned in the 2 years, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I've actually learned heaps, heaps more than I think I have a lot of the time. But yeah, I think if you stay excited as well about where your future can go. That's like, I'm very excited. I think if you have a lot of different areas of interest, which I do as well, so it's like you can really make it your own. You can go focus on one, or you can just like, maybe want something here and look at that for a focus area. Or still like really, I would definitely encourage people, which I've been encouraging my job, to try the different things. We do different areas of work at like modern slavery, psychosocial risk, and that is like the biggest advice I got, was like to try them all out and try and understand what you're interested in, which I think is important early career. Like, don't be too focused on needing to hit like a career goal by 2 or 3 years, because you've got so much time to do that. And I think just remind yourself what your goal is in your career, why you've wanted to do this career. That's why I always keep reminding myself. I what like why I want to do this is like, I want to help people. And that's, since even when I was in my town planning degree, I knew that's what I wanted. It was like, I want to help people. So I just keep remembering that, keep grounding myself with that goal. And yeah, kind of almost been manifesting. Like, I know I am, and
Good.
I will. And
Yeah. So it's a bit of a practice
yeah,
that you built in yourself
yeah,
around, if you like, the manifestation and using the mantra to remind yourself. Do you
yeah.
use any particular skills in that, like practices? Like, do you write it down? Do you write yourself a little plan? Do you have your goals written down somewhere, or is
Yeah,
it just
the first year I have actually like written down my goals. Trying to, yeah, I've really like written them out. But yeah, I think it's different for each person. Yeah, I just like to remind myself really, and I get excited about the future. So I just get excited where it can go, and there's just so many different avenues where my future will go, and I'm excited about like the change that I can make. I think that's what it is. I look forward to what type of change I can make, change I'm making now. And yeah, because you can get a bit, sometimes you do feel like you might not be doing as much as you maybe wanted to, or, the world isn't that great at times. So you get a bit like, oh, but if you just ground yourself back to why you're wanting to do it, and it's like, you may not like make world change, but if it's like a small impact just for one company, like that's great, or one community or one person.
yeah? I think that is a perfect place to kind of end it on that nice positive note. So I'm only going to ask you one more thing. And that is, if you had two questions that you could ask, because we're doing a professional series where we're talking to people with experience, if there were two things that you could ask, two questions you could ask, what would they be? Some of the
Mm.
upcoming guests.
Ooh, maybe one would be something about asking, like, them reflecting on their early career, like what
Yeah,
they would have done different maybe, or what
yeah,
they would encourage other people to do in their early career.
yeah,
Um, yeah, in a reflection, in the first 2 years out of uni, like
yeah.
what they would have done differently, or what they would encourage other people to do who are in their early career. That would probably be one of them. Two questions. What would be the other one? I would say maybe like how they see social impact moving forward into the future. Like in Australia, what direction they think it might go. What do they think it will get? You know, more. We said one is a bit more focused than the other. Usually, do they think that will kind of balance out like the social, environmental, or yeah? I'd just be interested to hear what they see in the future of social impact, I guess. So it's kind of like a
Great question.
past and a future.
Absolutely great questions. And as always, Amy, it's absolutely lovely to see you doing so well.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
lovely to
thank
see
you.
you again. You are insightful, thoughtful, and I have no doubt that the bright future, the things you want to achieve in terms of social impact, I look forward to seeing what they are, because I have no doubt that someone like you will manifest them into a reality.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrea. It was
Thank
so
you for
great to
your
chat to you.
time.
Yeah, of course. I've loved it. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed the All Things Social Impact podcast. You were listening to the Early Career series. Remember to like this video and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. I'd also like to invite you to the All Things Social Impact subscription site, where you'll have access to online tools, training, forums with like minded social impact professionals. And once a month, you'll be able to come online and have discussions with me. I'll leave a link in the comments below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you, and I'll see you at the next episode.